Without warning, my father spoke, his words cutting through the air like a jagged knife. "You're a burden to this family. You can't live here anymore." My breath caught in my chest. My mouth went dry. And for a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. The words didn't make sense. Not after everything I had done. I'm Sophie, 25 years old, with a stable job. It was supposed to be a simple Christmas dinner. A time for family to gather, laugh, and share warmth. The kind of evening you see in holiday movies. But as I sat at the dinner table with my family, my mom, my father, and my younger brother Lucas, the air was thick with something else. Something heavy. Something suffocating. The room felt too quiet. The usual clinking of silverware drowned out by the pounding of my own heartbeat. Every bite I took seemed to choke in my throat as if something was brewing in the silence, something I couldn't yet put my finger on. We had just finished the main course, and I was helping myself to some mashed potatoes when it happened. My dad, who had been unusually quiet throughout dinner, suddenly put down his fork. His eyes met mine across the table, and in that instant, the world seemed to freeze. His expression was unreadable, his face stone-cold as if he had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Then, without warning, he spoke, his words cutting through the air like a jagged knife. "You're a burden to this family. You can't live here anymore." I glanced at my mom, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but she didn't even meet my eyes. Instead, she let out a nervous laugh, as if she too wasn't sure of what had just happened. Her voice trembled, a feeble attempt to defuse the situation, but it fell flat in the heavy silence that followed. Lucas, my younger brother, froze in his seat, his fork still raised halfway to his mouth. His wide, confused eyes locked on me as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. I could see his mind racing, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out if Dad really meant it. But it was clear. The room had gone dead silent. Everything seemed to slow down. My thoughts scrambled to catch up with my body as I processed the weight of my father's words. I had been paying most of the bills for years. My father had been unemployed for as long as I could remember, and my mother worked part-time. I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on, that there was food on the table, that we had internet and heat during the cold months. But now, after everything, after all my sacrifices, I was being told I was no longer welcome in my own home. I was the problem. I was the burden. My voice barely escaped as I whispered. "What?" My head was spinning. I had to have misheard him. He couldn't have meant it. But then he repeated himself, his voice cold, almost robotic. "You're no longer needed here. You've overstayed your welcome. It's time you moved out." My heart sank into my stomach. The realization hit me like a freight train. This was it. This was what all my hard work had amounted to. I had sacrificed so much for them, yet they saw me as nothing more than a burden, something to cast aside. I wanted to scream, to argue, to beg them to see the truth. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. I couldn't waste my time trying to make them understand. I had given everything for them, and now they had turned their backs on me. I stayed calm. I had to. There was no point in reacting with anger or hurt. If they wanted me gone, then I would leave. It wasn't worth fighting for anymore. I took a deep breath and stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I grabbed my plate, walked to the sink and set it down. My hands trembled, but I couldn't show them how badly this was tearing me apart. As I walked past them, I stole a quick glance at Lucas. His terrified expression stabbed at me, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't ready to face this fight. I could see it. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to fix this mess. I didn't say another word. There was no need. I walked past my parents, my heart breaking with every step I took. I had made up my mind. If they wanted me gone, then they would lose everything I had provided for them. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I wasn't going to be their punching bag. I was done. I walked straight to my room, closed the door behind me and began packing. I didn't need to understand why they were doing this. I didn't need their approval anymore. All I needed was to get out of there. To find my own way. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I could finally choose myself. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. The weight of what had just happened was slowly sinking in, like the heavy air after a thunderstorm. I stood there for a moment, my back pressed against the door, feeling the gravity of it all. I had just been told, on Christmas dinner of all nights, that I wasn't wanted. That I had been a burden to my own family. The thought was suffocating. I stumbled over to my bed, sitting down heavily, the feeling of numbness spreading through my limbs. My heart was a tangled mess of anger and hurt, but all I could do was sit in silence. I had no words left to speak. I could hear my mom's frantic voice downstairs, her words muffled, a combination of anxiety and fear. She was trying to calm Dad down, but his voice was much firmer now, cutting through the house with an edge of authority. He was insistent, practically commanding, that I should have moved out years ago. I wasn't listening anymore. I couldn't. It didn't matter what they said, what excuses they made. I was done. I grabbed my duffel bag, my hands trembling as I began tossing clothes inside. The action felt mechanical, like a part of me had already left, and the rest of me was just going through the motions. I had given so much for them, but it was never enough. The realization hit me again, sharp and painful. I had been the one to keep the lights on, to pay for the groceries, the internet, the bills that piled up while my father sat idle and my mom did what she could, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. About an hour later, there was a quiet knock on my door. I looked up, surprised. It was Lucas. He stood in the doorway, his eyes red and swollen from crying, his face pale like he hadn't slept in days. He slipped inside quickly, closing the door behind him, like he didn't want anyone to know he was here. He moved toward me, his expression a mix of confusion and panic. He sat down beside me, barely speaking, but I could feel the tension in the air. His voice finally broke through the silence, a quiet whisper. What the hell just happened? Mom's freaking out and Dad's lost it. I didn't answer right away. I just shook my head, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. It wasn't his fault, but it hurt that he didn't understand. He wasn't old enough to fully grasp everything, not yet. I'm leaving tomorrow, I told him, my voice low but firm. Lucas stared at me, disbelief written all over his face. His mouth opened, then closed, like he didn't know what to say. Where are you going? You can't just leave us, he pleaded, the desperation in his voice making my heart break. I didn't want to leave him. I really didn't. But I had no choice. I couldn't stay in a place that had turned so toxic, so suffocating. Not anymore. I swallowed hard, looking away, not wanting him to see the tears that were threatening to spill. I'm going to figure it out, I said, my voice shaky. But I'm not staying here, not after this. He shook his head, frustration building in his eyes. He didn't get it. You pay for everything, everything. Without you, they can't even afford groceries. How are we going to survive without you? I felt a lump form in my throat. I had known this day would come, but hearing it from him made it hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had kept everything together for years. But now, I was the one falling apart. But no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't go back. I know, I whispered, my eyes stinging. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the one who fixes everything while no one else does anything. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. And I saw the question hanging on his lips. A question that neither of us wanted to ask. Can I come with you? He said hesitantly, his voice so small. My heart stopped. I stared at him for a long moment, the words dying on my lips. He was 17, still just a kid. He shouldn't have to deal with any of this. I wanted to take him with me, wanted to protect him from everything that was happening. But I knew the reality of the situation. You know they would never let that happen. I said softly, my voice full of regret. Lucas's eyes welled up with tears. And I felt the sting of guilt cut through me like a knife. I had failed him. But he would have to figure it out just like I was. He had to make his own decisions now. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words barely coming out. I have to go. And with that, I pulled him into a quick hug before he had time to say anything else. We both knew this was the end of something. The end of the person I had been. The person he had known. And no matter how much I wanted to fix everything, I knew I couldn't save anyone but myself. The next morning I woke up early, before the sun had even risen. The house was still silent, the only sound my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I had barely slept, but there was no way I was staying another minute under that roof. The tension, from the night before hung in the air, but it wasn't as suffocating anymore. I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was free. I stood up, the floor cold against my feet as I made my way to my room. I hadn't planned for this. There was no packing up my life in some neat, orderly way. But here I was, about to walk away. From everything I had known. And I felt relief. Not regret. I looked around the room. The place that had been home for so many years. My walls were lined with memories. Some good, some bad. But all of them were mine. I had put so much of myself into this house. But now, all I could feel was the weight lifting from my shoulders. I was done. The walls that once protected me had now become a prison, and I wasn't going to stay any longer than I had to. There was no sadness. Just relief. I walked to the door and grabbed my bag, ready to step into the unknown. Before I left, I took a moment to go through the house. I removed my name from all the bills. Electric. Internet. Water. I made sure they'd feel my absence. They'd have to figure it out without me. I wasn't their crutch anymore. And I wasn't going to bail them out this time. No more pretending to be the one who fixed everything. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I left the house behind without a second glance. The car ride to Emma's apartment felt oddly freeing. The world outside the window was quiet. As if the universe itself was giving me space to breathe. When I got to Emma's place, she was already up. Her messy hair and tired eyes showing she wasn't expecting me at such an early hour. She welcomed me in, offering me a place to crash. I collapsed onto her couch, which was surprisingly uncomfortable. The springs dug into my back, and the cat jumped up to sit on my chest, purring loudly in the quiet of the morning. Emma's roommate kept asking if I was planning to stay forever, and while the question was annoying, I didn't let it bother me. None of it mattered anymore. I wasn't supporting a family who only saw me as a source of money and security. I wasn't pretending to be someone's puppet anymore. I had cut the strings, and there was no going back. 3 days later, my phone started blowing up. I ignored the calls at first. Mom, Lucas, and to my surprise, even Dad. I didn't need to hear their voices. Not after everything that had happened. But then I saw the text from Lucas. They're freaking out. The power's off. The internet's gone. They don't know what to do. I smirked to myself. Did they really think the bills would pay themselves? They were finally getting a taste of what it felt like to depend on someone else. Another text came through from Lucas. Dad's losing his mind. He's blaming you for everything. I let out a sigh. This was only the beginning. They had no idea how bad it was going to get without me. The power was gone. The internet was down. And soon, everything they took for granted would fall apart. The reality was setting in for them. They were on their own now, and honestly I couldn't wait to see how far they'd spiral without me. The next morning, I woke to an alert on my phone. A fraud notification from my bank. I felt my stomach drop as I read the message. Suspicious login attempt detected. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly who had tried to access my account. It had to be my father. He was the only one desperate enough to do something like this. The bile in my throat rose as I thought about how far he had gone. I had already done everything for him. For them. And now, after everything that had happened, he thought he could just take from me again. It was sickening. I was furious, but there was no time to waste. I called Lucas immediately, my voice shaking, as I asked him if he knew anything about this. Yeah, I thought I heard Dad on the computer last night, Lucas said, his tone strained. He was talking about your bank account. I squeezed my phone in my hand, the pressure building as the anger bubbled up. He was that desperate. Desperate enough to try to hack into my accounts. I had given them everything I could. And this? This was the ultimate betrayal. Without hesitation, I changed all my passwords. I called my bank and froze my accounts before I could hear any more from Lucas. I wasn't going to let him steal from me again. I felt a wave of disgust flood through me. How low could he sink? Later that afternoon, as I sat in Emma's apartment, trying to distract myself with a mindless game on her couch, I heard it. A loud, violent bang on the door. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I didn't even need to look. I knew exactly who it was. Dad. Emma turned to me, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. Who is it? She asked, but I didn't respond. My mind was already racing. I could hear Dad's voice now, booming through the hallway, demanding that I open the door. He was yelling. Angry. Irrational. Desperate. It didn't matter what he said. He was already out of control. He had crossed the line. I sat perfectly still. My hands clenched into fists, but I didn't move. The rage building inside me was intense, but it wasn't worth reacting. It was just him trying to manipulate me once again. I wasn't going to let him do it. This time, he wouldn't win. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. My voice was steady, controlled. There's a man outside my door trying to break in. He's my father. I need the police here now. The weight of my decision settled around me like a blanket, but there was no turning back. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Each second felt like an eternity, but somehow, I felt more alive than I had in years. This was the moment that would define everything. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. When the police arrived, I stepped aside, letting them take over. I didn't even flinch when they handcuffed him. I stood there, unmoved, as my father's eyes burned into me with pure, unrelenting hatred. As they led him away, his words pierced the air, a final shot across the bow. You did this, he spat, his voice dripping with venom. I couldn't even bring myself to respond. I didn't care anymore. I had finally taken control. And, for the first time, I felt like I was truly free. After my father's arrest, the weight of the situation began to settle in. I knew this wasn't the end. Nothing with my family ever was. Later that evening, my phone rang, and the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Lily. Mom's crying, she said, her voice shaky. She's blaming you for everything, and now she's trying to get bail money for Dad. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it all hit me like a wave. They had no money. I had been their financial lifeline for years. But now, they were on their own, and it felt strangely satisfying. They had lost everything, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. True peace. But the chaos didn't stop there. The very next day, I received a message from Lily. "Mom's selling your stuff," it read. My blood ran cold. I dialed my mother's number immediately, and when she picked up, there was no shame in her voice. No apology. She simply said, "Since you don't live here anymore, it's fair game." The entitlement in her words struck me hard, but I was done. Done with their manipulation, their control, and their theft. I told her I'd be coming over to collect my things, and the second I walked into the house, she tried to stop me. But I wasn't going to let her. I grabbed what was mine. My clothes, my laptop, everything I had left behind. As I did, I called the police again, reporting the theft. Mom stood there, fuming, but I didn't care anymore. Lily stood quietly by, watching, torn between loyalty to her parents and the harsh reality that they had crossed a line. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye. My car was sitting in the driveway. It had been driven, the seat adjusted, and the gas tank was almost empty. It had stolen it. Mom confronted me just as I was about to leave, but I stayed calm, my voice even. "Give me the key," I said, my eyes fixed on hers, "or I'm calling the cops again." For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a huff, she threw the key at me and I caught it. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving the Bay House for good. As I drove off, I felt the weight lift completely. I was finally free. I had blocked their numbers, changed my banking information, and moved into a new place. Lily would stay in touch, but I knew I would never go back. I heard that my parents were struggling. Dad still hadn't found a job, and Mom had lost the house. They tried to reach out to me, messages, calls, even letters. But I had made my choice. I was done being the person they leaned on for everything. This was my life now, and I was going to live it for me. If you've ever found yourself or seen a similar situation, standing up for your own happiness and peace, hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about finding strength and taking control of your own life, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Stay strong, and remember, you are never alone in your journey.